Welcome ladies and gents, Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter, or of course you can subscribe to the channel Let's Talk Boxing. Of course we were all left bitterly disappointed by the fact that Tyson Fury did not meet Alexander Usyk this month. However, Bob Arum has given us a glimmer of hope. He has said that for both fighters to have their terms met, the fight really needs to occur in Saudi Arabia, and it's not impossible for that to happen at the end of the year. So there is a glimmer of hope there. So fingers crossed it does happen, because this is a fight for the ages, and that would not be too far gone from when the original date was set. So unless the two guys start to receive damage in the interim, then you would expect that both guys would be in pretty good nick. Now, in the interim, Alexander Usyk has a mandatory to defend against in Daniel Dubois, and Tyson Fury is set for a summer showdown, and that return is said to be against Andy Ruiz Jr. Andy Ruiz actually designed this fight poster himself when the fight was first being mooted, because they bonded over their faith and they had certain shared values according to Andy Ruiz Jr. and they got on really well. But make no mistake, Ruiz got on well with AJ too, and with Joseph Parker and pretty much everyone else he's been in the ring with. The fact of the matter is, when it's showtime, Andy Ruiz switches on and he becomes a monster in there, and he'll be looking to take off Tyson Fury's head and to rip away his title in the meantime too. And although a lot of people are trying to undermine this and downplay it, this is actually a fight that is a real threat to Fury in my opinion, and it's a fight that also adds to his legacy. You see, people talk about this as though it's going to be easy for Fury to just jab and grab. The fact of the matter is though, a lot of us feel, and have felt for a long time, that Tyson Fury's legs aren't quite what they used to be, and that's why he's adapted to become a more aggressive power punching type of fighter, because he can't move the way he used to move when he fought Vladimir Klitschko, for instance. So getting on his bike and moving around the ring for 12 rounds might not be as easy as you might think against someone like Andy Ruiz. Additionally, Ruiz is very barrel-chested, and he has these explosive hands whereby he lets go of very fast combinations with real short power. So as you get close and try to wrap your arms around him, he's a very difficult guy to tie up. Getting your arms around this barrel of a man is hard, and because his hands are moving so fast, he starts to punch inside the wheelhouse of your extended arms. It's difficult to get underhooks against him too. He's a difficult guy to deal with, Andy Ruiz. And although the second fight against AJ was hardly a great advert for him, where AJ was able to box and move and keep it long, the fact of the matter is, number one, he did not expect AJ to come in that sort of shape and that sort of tactics. So he didn't necessarily expect to prepare for a fight like that. Additionally, Andy Ruiz came in very heavy in that second fight. And a lot of people will often talk about the first fight and say AJ got his tactics wrong by coming in too heavy. No one really talks about the fact that Andy Ruiz came in very heavy in the second fight, to such an extent that Manny Robles, his trainer, was very critical of him. And there was all this insinuation, even from his cornerman, that he was perhaps resting on his laurels after that first victory against AJ and hadn't been taking training seriously. He's now become a millionaire. He's not really living the life. He's barely coming to the gym. There were times when that was one of the insinuations from Manny Robles. Let's not get it twisted though. If Andy Ruiz is up for it, he's a problem. Even against Joseph Parker in that first world title fight he had, where he fell short via split decision, and many people felt he won, but Parker got the decision in New Zealand. That was a prime Joseph Parker. It's not the Joseph Parker you see now. That Parker did have some good feet. He was able to move. He did have really fast hands, and Ruiz didn't have a problem closing the gap on him. So don't assume that if Fury's legs are gone compared to what they used to be, that this is just going to be a case of, yeah, let me jab and maintain range for 12 rounds, and if he comes close, I'm going to easily tie him up. And, you know, with boxing fans, they're so reactive to what they see to such an extreme level that you have to actually consider Andy Ruiz as a priority fight because of the sort of legacy it will give you. Hear me out. So, not that long ago, Filip Hrgovic was considered to be the monster of the heavyweight division, the boogeyman, right? There was a period whereby 8 fighters rejected the eliminator for the IBF before Zhilei Zhang accepted. This was only in February last year, this article, right? And people were avoiding him like the plague. Then the fight comes against Zhilei Zhang. Now, this was a fight I actually felt Hrgovic won, because I felt that Zhilei Zhang fell off a cliff. He started very well. He hurt Hrgovic. Hrgovic was looking in trouble. He was looking like he was going to get stopped. And then Zhang's output fell drastically. The seemingly disinterested Hrgovic then seemed to suddenly wake up a little bit. And he was able to outwork Zhang, and in my opinion, he was able to turn the fight around and win the fight on points, even though it was a very unconvincing performance. There were many that feel that Zhang actually beat hrgovic. Regardless of how you score it, it was a very close fight, and hrgovic did little to inspire. And suddenly, the boogeyman is being regarded as the useless man. People are talking about him like he's nothing. When people were talking potentially about hrgovic fighting Tyson Fury, people online, on Twitter, they're mugging it off. They're not seeing this as a test. Based on what? One fight? How can this guy be so avoided and so feared? And because of that one performance where there were extenuating circumstances, his father, who he was very close to, who he associates his entire boxing career with, has passed away. And he's in such an extreme state of mourning. It's really affected him. He's barely training. He has some serious extenuating circumstances. And people were not even willing to overlook that performance for those serious situations. So that's how fans react. One of the reasons they're able to dismiss hrgovic is because despite the reputation that came from him, the body of work prior to that had not been that incredible. This is what I always say about Benavidez winning the fight against Canelo. Prior to the Caleb Plant fight, he hadn't fought anyone. So if Canelo goes and obliterates him, people are then going to turn around and say, David Benavidez, he was a hype job. He wasn't all that. So from a legacy perspective, it means nothing, really, in the long term. Unless after losing to Canelo, for argument's sake, he goes on to have a terrific career. But if he doesn't, people will end up mugging him off. By the same token, now that hrgovic actually won a fight officially, and in my opinion, he genuinely did win the fight, people are still writing him off. Imagine he'd lost the fight. And this is why Tyson Fury, in my opinion, needs to look towards someone like Andy Ruiz, who does have a body of work in order to build that legacy. You see, another name that I'm seeing being thrown about very commonly is Frank Sanchez. Now, make no mistake, Frank Sanchez is a terrific talent. He's a little bit boring, there's no doubt about it, but he's very, very talented. He can get on the back foot and move, and when he jumps in with those raiding attacks, he carries real pop behind that. So Frank Sanchez would certainly be a tough test on paper, but in terms of a legacy, what does he offer? I mean, he doesn't offer a big money fight, and in terms of legacy, if you look at his CV, what is there? Efe Ajagba is his best win. And Efe Ajagba was never considered to be an elite level heavyweight. A lot of people were talking about his power. Maybe he could work his way into the top 10. But Ajagba was hardly a marquee name. He was, in this stacked division, maybe a C-level type of guy. And that aside, he's got guys like Christian Hammer, Carlos Negron. There's no great shakes there. His last fight is against Daniel Martz. I mean, just to put this into perspective, Martz is a heavyweight who at the time was 20-10-1 in his record. Frank Sanchez stopped him in round 1. Fabio Wardley stopped him in round 2. Simon Keane stopped him in round 3. Davtayev stopped him in round 1. Charles Martin stopped him in round 4. He'd lost 4 of his previous 6 fights prior to getting in the ring with Frank Sanchez. Is this the sort of guy that you're looking at and you're saying, okay, this is a good win now for Frank Sanchez. Let's get him in there against Tyson Fury. Because Frank Sanchez does not have a CV, if Fury was to go and obliterate him, people would say, this guy was another hype job. So from the perspective of legacy, you have to fight a guy who's got a body of work. And to further reinforce my point as to why Fury has to prioritize Andy Ruiz as an opponent, I want to show you how short the memories are of boxing fans. When Tyson Fury was going to fight Dillian Whyte, this was considered a serious fight. So much so that it sold out a stadium. It did great pay-per-view numbers despite the fact that Dillian Whyte was not promoting the fight, because he was essentially boycotting the promotion as he was feeling that the 80-20 split in favour of Fury was completely unfair. Many people felt that it wasn't the WBC that were pushing this, and it was actually Tyson Fury behind the scenes because he didn't want to fight Dillian Whyte. Now, a lot of people also said, well, listen, he'd been knocked out by Povetkin and so on and so forth. But you have to understand, he'd avenged that fight. In the fight he did get knocked out, he was on top and looking comfortable, and he'd hurt and dropped Povetkin, and then he got caught with a monster uppercut that was delivered with just technical excellence, and that sort of uppercut would have knocked out any heavyweight in the world. Make no mistake about that. In fact, Anthony Joshua himself had spoken about how if you looked at Povetkin's highlight reel knockouts, you would see that it was one of the best highlight reels you'd ever see because of his incredible short power. That doesn't make Dillian Whyte chinny. Now, yes, Fury also went on to knock out Dillian Whyte, but had he not knocked him out, people would have said, oh look, Povetkin was able to knock him out and Fury couldn't even dent him. Whereas because he knocked him out, all of a sudden it reinforces this idea that Dillian Whyte has a glass chin. I do also believe that his punch resistance has waned. I think that too. But there's a difference between being more vulnerable and being chinny. Dillian Whyte was still a top level heavyweight, and we'll get to that in a moment. But there are also people that are saying Dillian Whyte was never that good. He's just trash. He's garbage. These are the things that a lot of people have been telling me directly on Twitter over the last few days. Just take a little look at Dillian Whyte's CV. He's beaten the likes of Joseph Parker, a former world champion, a former regular title holder in Lucas Brown. He's beaten an Olympic gold medalist in Alexander Povetkin. He's beaten world title contenders like Derek Chisora on 2 occasions. Mariusz Vach, who had been a challenger. He'd beaten Oscar Rivas, who was an undefeated power punching guy that nobody really wanted a part of. He'd beaten an undefeated Jermaine Franklin, who you've gone on to see gave a very good account of himself against Anthony Joshua. This guy is no joke. And when Tyson Fury took him out, people now barely even talk about him as a side note in the legacy of Tyson Fury. In fact, Ring Magazine's annual ratings, if you look at his 2021 position, he was considered the 4th heavyweight in the world. And their 2022 annual ratings, he was 6th in the world. So when Tyson Fury's fought him, you're talking about him being anywhere between 4th and 6th in the world based on what he had achieved. Whilst I agree that there are certainly fighters out there who stylistically could offer Fury a lot of problems, Frank Sanchez being one of them. Another one would be Michael Hunter, a guy that I've been saying for a long time with his raiding style could upset a lot of the big names in the heavyweight division. But while that's the case, those guys haven't been taking on the challenges. Michael Hunter flat out ducked a fight against hrgovic. Frank Sanchez isn't fighting anybody. Dillian Whyte was, and he was beating proper guys. Dillian Whyte was a serious fighter, and Tyson Fury dealt with him. And that, instead of getting respect, is being revised. The history is being revised. And I want to show you what can happen with the revision of history. Do you remember when JOE CALZAGHE was going to fight Jeff Lacey? If you go and read some of the predictions from the staff at Boxing Scene, you'll see the general consensus on what the prevailing narrative was. Now, there were 4 or 5 guys that did pick JOE CALZAGHE to win that fight. Tentatively, most of their picks were he could win a close points decision and stuff like that. But the vast majority were not taking that approach. Hank Kaplan picked Lacey to stop him. You had Tim Smith saying Lacey by decision. Ron Borges was saying TKO in 10. Sammy Rosenberg was saying Lacey by 11th round knockout. Glenn Wilson was picking Jeff Lacey to win in 2 rounds. Eric Rinner was picking Jeff Lacey in 8. Larry Tornambe was picking Jeff Lacey late. You had Mark Workman, who said, I expect Lacey to rain down a torrent of uppercuts and trademark left hooks upon CALZAGHE and completely demolish him. I don't see it going beyond round 9. Carlos Irusta, I see Lacey winning. Evan Korn, Lacey will overwhelm CALZAGHE en route to a 2nd round KO. Joe Harrison, Lacey over CALZAGHE by the 8th round KO. Paul Gallegos, Lacey by KO in 7. James Blears, Jeff will overpower and knock out JOE CALZAGHE. All these predictions were constant and consistent, and there were many, many more. That's just a selection of them. But then what happened? CALZAGHE went on to absolutely pulverize Jeff Lacey, a man described as a cross between Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield, the new star of American boxing, and CALZAGHE ruined him. He was never the same again. And what do we hear after that about JOE CALZAGHE? Consider some of these headlines. JOE CALZAGHE undefeated but overrated. Sorry, but CALZAGHE never did it for me. Revisiting CALZAGHE, the British Svenotka. Why didn't CALZAGHE face better fighters? Can you be great without a resume? CALZAGHE, does he not have one of the most overglorified resumes in boxing history? In other words, in the context of the time, he's got no chance. He's going to get knocked out. Round 2, round 8, round 9, round 10, he's got no chance. He turns up, he batters the guy, he's never the same again. And does he get the props for it? No, because Lacey doesn't go on to have a stellar career. So he was just overrated. So we're not going to give Joe any rating for that. We're not going to give him credit for that. By the same token, if Tyson Fury goes and obliterates Frank Sanchez, he might be portrayed as a hype job without a CV too. You can see even with Dillian Whyte, who has a terrific CV, people are trying to undermine him. You can see with JOE CALZAGHE, when he fought a very highly rated Jeff Lacey, people went on to undermine him. So why not consider, when it's all said and done, that Andy Ruiz is a former heavyweight champion of the world. He also fought for a world title prior to that and lost controversially in many people's eyes. And when he did lose the titles, he lost them to a former Olympic gold medalist and former unified heavyweight champion of the world, with whom he is now 1-1 in a head-to-head. And he stopped AJ and only lost on points to AJ in the return. So he's going to be a fighter that's going to be regarded highly in terms of legacy. And if Tyson Fury's aim is greatness, well, then greatness is essentially status, and status is as much about PR as it is about actual achievements. And when you consider that Andy Ruiz is a Mexican-American, and Mexican-American fans and Mexican fans are some of the best in the world, some of the grandest fan bases, whereby if you can mythologize yourself in their eyes, they will propel you towards greatness with the reputation that you build among them. Well, when you consider that, Andy Ruiz has to be a high priority for Tyson Fury. He also has to, of course, see Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua. If those two fights don't happen, the fans will never forgive him. You could also make a very strong argument, one that I believe, that he should also face Joe Joyce as long as Joe Joyce continues to win. And this is a problem that Fury's going to face, because I never felt that that was necessary. But the longer it takes for him to clean up, if he's indeed capable of doing that, and becoming undisputed, the more likely it is for other fighters from his era to keep winning and for them to emerge as legitimate threats and for people to then accuse him of ducking if he doesn't fight them. So he needs to get a move on. But in the meantime, there's nobody else that offers the legacy, the money that Andy Ruiz offers at this present moment in time that is available. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents. Is there another fight that is available at this moment that you think would actually do better for Tyson Fury's long-term legacy as well as financially? Let me know in the comment section down below. Please don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Thanks for watching. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.